But back then, 1975, the people who had it were thrilled.
The nerds formed clubs to talk about their new toy. One of the first was the Homebrew Computer Club, which met on Wednesday evenings in a hall rented from Stanford University in Silicon Valley. Presiding over near anarchy was Lee Felsenstein, who pretended to be in charge.
I would start the meeting by making a horrendous loud noise because everyone was talking and I had to get some attention somehow. And I would use it to call on the person in question. I'd make threatening gestures with it. Most of us were in the electronics industry to a certain extent. There was also a stratum of physicians. And there were a lot of radio amateurs, for instance, finding a new technology that wasn't stale. But most of us were at a sort of middle level downwards. We saw ourselves as crazed, ignored geniuses, or possibly geniuses, but at least we could each hope to get our hands on a computer of our own.
Not much in them.
The very uselessness of the Altair is what drove the hobbyists together. Roger Mellon and Harry Garland started an early computer company. They came here to meet others and to figure out just what the heck could be done with this new toy. A solution in search of a problem.
There's no keyboard that I can see.
The Altair was tedious to use. At first, the only way that data and instructions could be given to the computer was by flipping switches. Take something trivial like 2 plus 2. Each 2 needed 8 different switches to be flipped, then a 9th switch was used to load them all. Add required another 9 switches. The answer 4 was if the third light from the left turned on. Eureka!
So if you had a program that was 100 bytes long, you had to go through this procedure 100 times to load that into memory.
It took a long time.
I bet it did. And what happened if you lost power or you lost your way in the middle?
You cried.
The Altair may have been frustrating, but it drove the nerds to experiment, finding real uses for the useless box, turning it from a curiosity to a computer.
Steve Dompier set up an Altair, laboriously keyed a program into it. Somebody knocked the plug out of the wall, and he had to do that all over again, but nobody knew what this was about. After all, was it just going to sit and flash its lights? No.
You put a little transistor radio next to the Altair, and he would, by manipulating the length of loops in the software, could play tunes.
The radio began playing The Fool on the Hill. Da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, in the tinny little tunes that you could tell were coming from the noise that the computer was generated, being picked up by the radio. Everybody rose and applauded. I proposed that he receive the Strip Phillips Screw Award for finding a use for something previously thought useless. But I think everyone was too busy applauding to even hear me.
It was a very exciting thing. It was probably the first thing the Altair actually did.
Turning the Altair into a useful tool required a programming language so users could type their programs in rather than flipping switches. What it needed was a version of some big computer language like BASIC, only modified for the PC. This was called a basic interpreter, but it didn't yet exist because the experts all thought that not even BASIC was basic enough to fit inside the tiny Altair memory. Yet again, the experts were wrong. Here comes the guy who solved the problem. 20 years after finishing the first microcomputer BASIC, Paul Allen is returning to Albuquerque for a celebration of that event, this time with his $15 million jet and 3-foot red carpet. At a time when I was killing brain cells, this guy was founding an empire. He has come to eat rubber chicken in honor of the Altair's 20th anniversary.
I'd like to introduce to you Paul Allen.
Allen co-founded Microsoft with his younger buddy from high school, Bill Gates.
One day in Boston, I was in Harvard Square, and I covered Popular Electronics with this thing that looked like what I'd been imagining. And so I grabbed it off the shelf, and I looked at it, and I bought it, and I ran back to Bill's dorm, and I think he was probably playing poker that night and usually losing money at that point. One of the few times when that's been the case.
Paul showed that to me. Then, okay, here was a company that would be needing software.
And he said, okay, well, we got to call these guys up and see if this thing is for real.
We realized that things were starting to happen, and just because we'd had a vision for a long time of where this chip could go, what it could mean, that didn't mean the industry was going to wait for us while I stayed and finished my degree at Harvard.
So called up Ed, we told him we've got this BASIC, and it's just, for your machine, it's not that far from being done, and we'd like to come out and show it to you.
So we created this BASIC interpreter. Paul took the paper tape and flew out. In fact, the night before, he got some sleep while I double-checked everything to make sure that we had it all right.
But I had no idea what it was really going to be like to try to run the software. It had never been run on an actual computer before.
He was very nervous about whether this would actually work. And he got to the office, and we all gathered around, and he put his fingers on the switches, and he loaded BASIC in with paper tape into the Altair.
I was so nervous. It's not going to work. It worked.
And it came up. And it could do a few little simple things.
And it was amazing when Paul called me up and said the thing had worked the first time. And of course it was incredibly fast.
And it printed out memory size, and I think Bill said, well, it printed something. And so I said, yeah.
Oh, that was unbelievable. The fact that it really worked was a breakthrough.
Maybe there wouldn't be a Microsoft if the screen hadn't come alive. Who knows? It might all be quite different.
After the demo succeeded, Bill forgot about finishing university. Afraid of missing his chance to dominate the new industry, he joined Alan in what was then the center of world microcomputing research, among the sleazy bars and gas stations of Albuquerque, New Mexico.
And they lived across the street from Mitz in the Sundowner Motel. And the prostitutes and the drug dealers are out on the corner, and they were writing BASIC for the Altair computer, and gradually they actually started Microsoft here in Albuquerque. So
we hired some of our high school friends basically to come down and stay with us in our apartment, which became very crowded.
Well, we were pretty young. We started when I was 19, and so we just had a lot of energy.
They worked really hard. They listened to really loud music. I could hardly stand to go in the software room sometimes because the music would be banging off the walls, mostly acid rock.
We'd usually go out, eat pizzas, and then go out and watch action movies.
They would work all night long, and there were days when Bill Gates would be sleeping on the floor in the software lab, and
sometimes would be Bill and these two other guys all, sitting on tables around the apartment with stacks and stacks of paper, writing, converting to BASIC for the 8080.
I still know the source code by heart, and that was a work of love. We just kept tuning and tuning that thing, and so that kind of craftsmanship paid off.
BASIC let the Altair be used for both fun stuff and real work. People attached terminals to the computer and began writing games, word processors, and accounting programs. Most of us didn't notice, but soon there was a thriving industry for enthusiasts. By the end of 1975, dozens of other companies were building microcomputers.
We created an industry, and I think that goes completely unnoticed. I mean, there was nothing. Every aspect of the industry, when you talk about software, hardware, application stuff, dealerships, you name it, was all done at Mitz.
It was a wild time. It was a very exciting time. And the first user convention, where we got people to come in and tell us what they were doing, what they were excited about. And other companies like Processor Technology or IMSI or Comemco got going as add-on companies. These companies are long forgotten, but they were the humble beginnings of the PC industry.
Left in the hands of those early hobbyists, the PC might have never made it to the shopping mall. Reaching the wider market required a different type of vision. Enter the flower children of California, who thought the PC was, well, groovy.